We've got to talk about Zach Bryan because there's been a lot happening this week. In case you're not up to speed, singer-songwriter Zach Bryan, one of the biggest names in Americana, independent country music, folk rock, whatever you want to call it at this point, sold his publishing catalog this past week for a whopping $350 million to a relatively new music industry entity called the Merit Group. In recent years, these kinds of deals have become commonplace but have drawn a ton of media and fan attention, with legendary artists like Bruce Springsteen, Neil Young, and Bob Dylan all selling their catalogs for hundreds of millions of dollars. However, what I think makes this deal so interesting is that Zach Bryan is making this move so early in his career. While Springsteen, Dylan, and Young are still releasing records and actively touring, they're kind of considered legacy acts at this point, in the sense that their commercial and creative heyday occurred decades ago at this point. Zach is still a part of the current generation of roots music singer-songwriters and is incredibly popular with young audiences today. There really isn't another example of an artist like him making this move today for that amount of money. And that's turned some heads and also ruffled a few feathers. So what does this deal mean? The reason that this move was a smart idea for Zach Bryan is pretty obvious. It's because it guarantees him a significant amount of money for his work. Unlike when legacy artists sell their publishing rights, it is yet to be determined whether Zach's music will stand the test of time. By selling his publishing rights now, there is a risk that he'll miss out on future income generated from that music. However, there's also the chance that that music could depreciate in value over time, and that if he held on to it, he wouldn't be able to sell it for nearly as much money in the future. What's popular in music changes all the time, and $350 million is generational wealth. If he's smart with his money, Zach Bryan doesn't have to do anything else for the rest of his life, except for make 2 more records for Warner Brothers. That was part of the agreement. Just to get into the nitty-gritty of music publishing for a minute, a publishing deal like Zach Bryan signed is only for the songwriting, that is, the lyrics and the composition of the music. And whoever owns the rights to those gets to collect money anytime they're used. So let's say an artist wants to record a cover of Something in the Orange for an upcoming record. They have to obtain what is called a mechanical royalties license, which basically says, this is the song that I want to cover, these are the writers, this is who owns the publishing rights, this is how many copies of that song I intend to sell, and therefore this is the amount of money that I owe to the publisher. This applies for both digital distribution on streaming services as well as for physical media like LPs and CDs. And if you own the publishing rights to a work, you also collect income on live performance. This applies both for the original artist that wrote it as well as for anyone that covers the song. So given how big Zach Bryan's shows are, and given how many artists there are across America that are playing his songs in venues, bars, breweries, everything, smaller acts and such, that is a ton of passive income that's being generated for the rights holders. Assumedly, Zach still owns the rights to his recordings, which are called masters, through his label Bucking Bronco, which he licenses out to Warner Brothers Music for distribution. However, since Zach sold the rights to his publishing catalog, if let's just say Toyota wants to put I Remember Everything in a car commercial, he can prevent Toyota from using his original recording of the song. However, what he cannot do is prevent another artist's cover of the song from being used in the commercial, so long as they have the sign-off from the Merit Group and the artist's label. So why is there controversy around this deal? Before getting into the beef, I think it's important just to acknowledge that this is uncharted territory. Even though Zach has achieved a kind of cultural omnipresence that's made him a huge star, he's still cut from the cloth of Americana, red dirt, and independent country music. Genres that are historically small, a lot smaller than mainstream country, and even smaller in comparison to pop, rock, and hip-hop. Nobody from this community, and especially this generation, has done a deal like this before, and that's sure to raise some eyebrows. And with Zach being somewhat of a polarizing figure among roots music fans, the fact that people had opinions shouldn't be too surprising. The real reason this story is turning heads this week is because of another Oklahoma-based singer-songwriter, John Moreland, who took the opportunity to call Zach out on social media. This story has a couple twists and turns, so bear with me for a minute. On Wednesday of last week, the day Zach's deal was announced, Moreland took to his Instagram story to say, $350 million is a lot of money to pay for the off-brand version of me. Fans immediately started taking sides and debating this matter, and it quickly became the big talking point in the Americana fan community. If you don't know John Moreland, he's another critically acclaimed Oklahoma-based singer-songwriter, beloved by fans for the heartbreaking, poetic lyrics that you can hear on songs like Cleveland County Blues, off of his essential album High on Tulsa Heat. Moreland's been on the scene for well over a decade now, and has attained a reputation as an exceptionally talented singer-songwriter, and has gained a strong following of loyal fans. He's never achieved the commercial success of Zach Bryan, but he has carved a place for himself that feels honest and has made him one of those your favorite artist type of folks. In 2024, John Moreland appeared on Zach's song Memphis the Blues, off his Great American Bar Scene album, which brought him more widespread recognition and for a while was his most streamed song. Zach felt betrayed by Moreland's comments, and perhaps rightfully so. Zach posted on his Instagram story that he wouldn't have people that have a problem with him on his records, and that he was going to replace Memphis the Blues on the album. Now, Moreland has been known to be hot-tempered and to get into some scrapes over the years. Famously, last year, he got into a barroom fight with Turnpike Troubadours fiddle player Kyle Nix, a situation that just left fans absolutely bewildered. Nobody really knew how to make heads or tails of it, both artists kind of had an ornery public persona, and eventually the story kind of just faded away. Until this past week when Moreland called out Zach Bryan, when people started to suggest that maybe there's a little bit of a pattern here. However, that perception began to shift a bit this week when John Moreland took to Instagram once again to make some final comments, saying that he had no regrets about the situation.
When I was asked to be on that album, I did not know that dude. Then we record the song, the album comes out like a month later. I had met him once at that point. At this point, I've hung out with him 5-6 times. I don't like this motherfucker. I don't want to be on an album with a dude who is a dickhead to my wife and my friends right in front of me every time I see him. I don't want to be on an album with a dude who I've heard tell borderline racist jokes more than once. I don't want to be on an album with a dude who brings a 19-year-old girl in the bar, and then when they tell him she can't be in there, looks at me like I'm supposed to have his fucking back. I don't like that person. I don't like that person. That's who thinks I'm an asshole. Fine.
This changed the tone of the discussion a little bit, especially in the light of the fact that Zach has had a few public incidents over the past year or so that have put his attitude and actions under a lot of public scrutiny. Zach was arrested after pulling a "do you know who I am" kind of deal in a traffic stop. He frequently blows up on social media in response to fan comments, and perhaps most tellingly, his former girlfriend Brianna Chicken Fry accused him of being emotionally abusive in a recent interview, and also claimed that Zach's team tried to pay her $12 million to sign an NDA. Add on top of that a now deleted post from fellow singer-songwriter Drayton Farley backing up John Moreland's claims and offering his own experience and insight from having opened for Zach Bryan before. I'm going to refrain from sharing the exact details of Drayton's post. After all, he has deleted it now. Perhaps he regrets elements of what he said. However, suffice to say, it did not paint a very flattering picture of Bryan. Over the past year, fans' perception of Zach Bryan has shifted pretty dramatically. And while many still enjoy his music, it's become kind of clear that the version of himself that he presents to the world doesn't exactly line up with his own actions and ideas. And I have empathy for the fact that a meteoric rise like Zach has had often puts a lot of pressure on people and causes them to act in ways that they never would have conceived of. It's difficult to act right under that pressure sometimes. However, having empathy doesn't mean you can just excuse bad behavior, and if Zach has actually done a lot of these things that people are saying he's done and acted this way, I think he's gonna have to answer to it eventually. But then again, this is the music industry, so we'll see. Zach's fans have already rushed to social media to defend him, saying, "Who's John Moreland?" Which I absolutely hate that kind of argument. I mean, personal experiences and opinions are not invalidated by streaming metrics. You can be a total piece of shit and still have millions of monthly listeners if they like your music. Happens all the time. Plus, that attitude just robs you of experiencing some great music like John Moreland. John Moreland is a great artist, and if you're gonna just dismiss him because you haven't heard his name before, you're hurting yourself. He might not give you the exact same thing Zach Bryan does, but you should listen to him before passing judgment. To sum this up, my stance on the matter is I think John Moreland is probably cantankerous and somewhat unpredictable. However, I think his dissatisfaction with Zach Bryan's behavior and the way he acts and his success in the light of that comes from a genuine place. Zach could be the bigger person here and keep the song up and try and make amends, But I don't think he has any interest in that. He realizes he has the power, and so if he just wants to take someone off, he can do that. And honestly, whether Moreland's allegations are true or not, I can't blame Zach for that. But it does seem interesting to me that when you look back at a lot of the artists that supported Zach Bryan on his come up, not a lot of them seem really interested in hanging around him anymore. As a listener, it's up to you to decide how this affects your relationship with the music, if at all. If you're a separate the art from the artist kind of person, none of this matters to you. In fact, I'd be surprised if you're still on the video at this point, so hi. Personally, I'm not going to defend Zach's worst behaviors, but I'm also not going to stop listening to him in this circumstance, and same with John Moreland too. Memphis the Blues is currently down on Spotify. We'll see if it stays down or if anything else new develops here, but for now, it's been a pretty wild week in the world of roots music. For the sake of having some sense of impartiality here, I'm going to recommend you listen to Drayton Farley's 2021 album, A Hard Up Life. Drayton is a fantastic singer-songwriter, and you might find a new artist you really love by listening to this album. Alright, let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm Brent Funkhauser from Red Moon Media. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoy great roots music, Americana, independent country, folk rock, anything in that nature, that's all I talk about here on this channel, so please follow along and subscribe. Thanks for watching.